Hey everyone, thanks for joining, and for those watching after the fact, you're in for a treat. We have the great Mark McLean with us here today. Mark, I don't even have the breath to go through all your credentials, but Mark, a past president of TREB, president of Property.ca. I know he did some stuff with Real, amongst many other things. I won't do it any justice, so maybe a good starting point is, why don't you let us know a little bit about your real estate journey and some of the stops you made on the way?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Before I start, I got laryngitis last week. I'm still getting over it. It's a bit of a chest thing, so I may take a break to cough every once in a while, but I do apologize for that in advance. Yeah, so as David said, I've been around for a long, long time. If you haven't heard my name, I been now 32, 33 years in the industry. I started Sotheby's International Realty here in Ontario. I was a broker manager at Bosley for 7 years. I went to Property.ca. I was the president and broker of record there for a while. And I was also president of the Toronto Real Estate Board. I was a director at the Ontario Board. I sat on tons of committees all the way up to CREA, and I'm actually running for CREA again this year. So we'll see. It's 13 people running for 3 positions, so it'll be a tough battle. And I also took 4 years off to work in the private sector. While I still had my license and I was still, really heavily involved in real estate, I worked as a VP for a prop tech company. And basically what we were trying to build, was something similar to a rent to own. We called it rent and own. I really won't get into it, but really interesting opportunity. I've always been pulled in to companies to take them from a 1 to a 2. I did that with Sotheby's. I did that with Bosley. I did that with property. And this was an opportunity to really go from a 0 to a 1, sitting around in a room with 3 guys, 4 guys, deciding, okay, this is what we want to build. How do we do it? And so that gave me just a ton of experience and really, really great journey. So when it came time, my shares had all vested. I was kind of tired of working through the pandemic. I want to get back into real estate. These are my people that I love to talk to and communicate with, belly to belly, coach and train and educate and offer advice and run meetings and all those sort of things. That is right up my alley. So I was really excited to come back into the real estate world with that kick. So that's been kind of my experience. And obviously this whole TRESA thing, so many things happening on the real estate landscape. I'm actually kind of overwhelmed. And this is the exciting thing for me. When I'm sitting on my hands just watching the world go by, I get really bored. So throw stuff at me, throw the competition bureau at me, throw, which I had to deal with when I was at TREB. Throw this big lawsuit that's coming our way, throw TRESA at us, throw the healthcare at us. I just kind of love digging into that and finding a nice lane and helping people navigate that. So that's what I'm all about, David.
I appreciate that, Mark. And if those who don't know, Mark's like a great follow. I know you have YouTube, but that Twitter account is awesome. I
My
love that.
TikTok.
Oh, TikTok. It was your TikTok. I love that Christmas poem you did.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite
Funny story. I did a TikTok a couple of weeks ago about the cash for keys debate that's going on, pitting landlords against tenants. And it's a really ugly battle. But that one TikTok, I think, is closing in at 200,000 views. And the comments just going back and forth are insane. And it's really a crazy, crazy battle. So, I have lots of things to say about that as well. And but anyway, we're here to talk about TRESA, right?
Yeah. So
All right.
enlighten us and hopefully clear up a little bit of the confusion that's happening.
So, and let me just open. I can share my screen, yeah?
Yep.
Let me see how I do that. Hang on 1 second. Do this. You see my 1 second here. This guy, where is it? It's in here somewhere. This bar is in the way. Oh, here we go. Can you see this? you see it? All right, perfect. And you can hear me okay? All right, excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about, well, I'm going to talk a lot about TRESA. And by the way, David, how long do I have?
As long as you want, maybe if we can keep it to like a 25 or so we can have a
All right.
Q&A would be good.
All right, I'm going to go super fast. And what I'm going to do, because this is like an hour-long presentation, but I'll just go over high-level stuff. I'll pepper it with a few stories, and I'm going to send you the deck, and you can share it. It's got links. It's got everything in it, okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about TRESA. This is like the phase 2 that's going on right now. The phase 1 was a kind of a ridiculous thing. It basically allowed us to call ourselves realtors, call ourselves agents, like that sort of thing. It was, very, very kind of wishy-washy. But phase 2 came in December 1st. And it was really just thrown I would say, thrown down our throats. OREA didn't even have the forms until like basically December 1st. So it was crazy. And by the way, they launched a whole bunch of forms and then they took a whole bunch back. They've changed them. So it's really an evolving thing. But don't let it scare you. I think the reality of what TRESA does is it kind of just bakes in some of the things that, we've already been doing, and some of the things that just kind of needed to get done and be clarified and compete to be sort of more transparent. And so let's not, don't get sort of overwhelmed by it. I mean, it's a shit ton of excuse my French, a shit ton of legislation, but bite it off in small pieces. And that's what I hope I can do for you today. So we don't need to talk about this. This is just the introduction. So there's a couple of big sort of things that are in TRESA. One of them is this idea of open offers. And really the truth is that this is one thing that, the public wants, or the public kind of feels that there's some kind of need for. Whether or not we actually use it, I think there are places when we would use it. But the idea is that a seller can say to their agent, yeah, I want to have an open offer type of system where I can give out details of all the other offers, right? So in a very broad sense, that's what it's about. Now, there's some kind of idiosyncrasies to this, because if I have 5 offers, they're all going to be different. They're all having different prices. They're all going to have different conditions. They're all going to have different terms, deposits, closings. And basically what this sort of allows you to do, this open offer type thing, is to say, provided that everyone agrees to it, provided that the seller agrees to it, is to say, look, I want to tell you, we've got all the offers. Here's where we're at. We've got one offer that is this price, closing here with this deposit, no conditions. I've got one offer that's this price. Here's a small condition, closing here. And it gives you all that. You can't obviously give away names and all that sort of stuff, critical information. So, but the other kind of weird thing about this particular piece of legislation is that it can be turned on and turned off at any time. So you might go into an offer presentation with 5 offers and not have this, and then the seller says, "Hey, let's let it rip now." And then you might go a little while, and then the seller might say, "Okay, let's turn it off." So now we're going to be more secretive about it. So the reality is that I can't imagine a seller wanting to ever do this, because we've been working in an environment where they're all basically sealed bids, right? And we protect everybody. But there is one sort of situation where you might want to do it, and that's when you have 25 or 30 offers on the table, and you say, look, let's get rid of 99% of these offers. Let's boil it down to the 3. And so you might say to everybody, okay, guys, the seller is asking me to let you know what the prices are for all the offers, and we've got 2 at $1 million, we got 1 at 995, and we've got 14 at under 700,000. So those 14 can just go home and enjoy the rest of their night, and then we can just start to deal with that, and then we'll turn it off again, right? And then we're just going to deal with those top 3 or 4 offers. So that's a situation where you might kind of use this thing. Other than that, I can't honestly see a situation where we would use it. This is kind of in kind of the way it works in Australia. And as we know, there's this sort of everyone standing around on the front yard bidding for a house. It's not a really great situation. Now, there's also this thing called the self-destruct clause, because you might be with a, you might have a buyer, for instance, who says, look, I don't want my information out there. I don't want to get into a situation where, people know what my offer is, even though they don't know who I am. And so OREA, excuse me, wrote this offer, which basically says, hey, if you want to disclose all the details of all the competing offers, I'm out. That's all it says. And so it's sort of like a self-destruct clause, if that makes any sense. Again, I'm just gonna speak high level about all the things that are happening in TRESA, and I'll pass on this slide deck, which David, you're more than welcome to share with everybody. Okay, so the next big kind of change, and these are all kind of a bit out of order, but because I think this is probably one of the biggest changes, is this idea of representation, right? So really what we have right now is this, or what we had previous to TRESA, was this brokerage representation. That's spelled wrong. How about that? And the idea is that I work for a brokerage, I have a client, and somebody else in my office has a listing. So we're basically duty bound to provide a limited set of services to both, because we're working in the same brokerage. And the reality is that when we take on a listing, it's not our listing, it's not my listing, it's the brokerage's listing, right? And so there's a responsibility, for the entire brokerage to work under certain kind of rules and manners. The truth of the matter is that, David, if we're working at the same brokerage and you have a listing and I have a buyer, we're talking under brokerage representation. By law, we have a certain level of responsibility that we play for both. And this is it becomes a multiple representation agreement, right? Because we're both working for the same brokerage. The truth of the matter is that I'm looking after my buyer 100%. I'm going to give my buyer every ounce of my effort to get them to buy that house. And you're looking after your seller and you're giving them 100% of your effort. So regardless of what the kind of the rules say and what our jobs are, our duties to our sort of mutual clients, we're looking after each other's clients, right? And this is how I think what the new law kind of wanted to embody, which is taking that sort of brokerage representation and breaking it down so that I have duties to my client, you have duties to your client, even though we work in the same brokerage. And basically what happens is that mutual representation actually disappears. So I won't go into it with the slides here, but let me just talk about this is what they call designated representation. And so the drawing basically says, here's the brokerage, here are all the agents, but my duty is to my client, the buyer. And if you're working for the same brokerage, your duty is to your client, the seller. There is no mutual representation. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, let's talk about multiple representation. So there is, under designated rep, if we're two agents working for the same company with their own buyer and seller, there's no multiple representation. Makes sense. But what happens when David, you're the listing agent and you have your own buyer? Well, now, yes, there is multiple representation. So this is the only situation where that would exist. So there's a couple of things that you have to do right away, which is, as soon as you think that there's going to be multiple representation, you need to get everyone to agree to it. That's all. It's really, really simple, actually, in a lot of ways. So I don't need to get into that. And so as soon as you know that there's going to be multiple representation, before you put anything to paper, you got to get everyone to acknowledge that. So there's two forms. There's a multiple representation for the seller. There's a multiple representation for the buyer. And those are the two forms there. And you just get everyone to agree to it. So that's it. It's really simple. There is going to be a little bit of change in the kind of the level of service that you're going to give to everybody, but that's okay because everyone's agreed to it. And so this may happen. I mean, it's going to happen all the time, basically. But particularly, let's say in really, really small markets where you're the only agent, which it does happen. Or you have, you're listing your house with your best friend, and that best friend is super connected to everybody in the community, and then somebody else wants to buy that house, there, of course, they're going to go through you. So this acknowledges that, right? I think there was a concern that in the broad strokes of real estate, that there was a concern that multiple people were going to the agent directly to hopefully get some deals on commissions or whatever. That this is kind of meant to alleviate that in a very roundabout kind of way. I would say it's like a bit of a softball kind of approach to trying to help consumers with the new legislation. So the brokerage representation, as I said, there could be a situation where you as a broker say to your client, I work under the other representation. Your office works under brokerage representation, but I work under the designated representation. And so the question is, can I work in that regard? Yes, you can, of course. It becomes a little bit more complicated because in one sense, you're going to be a designated rep, and in the other sense, you're going to be a brokerage. I think the legislation allows this to happen. It becomes a little trickier. And so, I think that for the most part, like our company, we're going to be designated representation. That's the simplest way. And as I said earlier, this is kind of how we've always worked anyway. So now it just sort of bakes it into legislation. Okay. We've all had we've all had customers. And there's a whole group of sort of subset of people that we worked with that we called consumers. And all do different paperwork and all that sort of stuff. Now, the idea that what TRESA does is it says, take that notion of a customer and just rip it up. There are no more customers. If someone doesn't want to be a client, then they're going to be what we call a self-represented party. And it is really just in place. It's not like a rename of the customer service, because when you have a customer, you are providing some services to that person. But as a self-represented party, you're not responsible for, you're not providing any services. And I think this is really kind of one of the, in all the chat groups and all this stuff, it's one of the hardest things for people to kind of wrap their heads around, is this idea of a self-represented party. Hang on. We can say, if we have any questions, we'll keep them for the end. But the idea is that if you talk to somebody who says, look, I know everything about real estate, I'm not an agent, but I can do everything myself. You say, fantastic. And that's it. And then they ask you, so tell me a little bit about the house. You can absolutely tell them about the house, because you have to always kind of go back to this thing. If the information that I'm providing to that self-represented party helps my client sell the house, then it's worth me giving. Now, what if he said, so if the guy says, how old's the furnace? You say, yeah, it's this old. How old's the roof? Sure, it's here. What have other houses sold for on the street? A little bit trickier, right? Because you want to get the house sold, but you can't let them believe that you're providing a knowledgeable sort of service to them. And so in this regard, you have to really tread lightly. So, I mean, I kind of believe that if someone says, can you tell me about all the other sales in the street so I can help, figure out how much I want to offer? I think the comment that I would say is, listen, Mr. Buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, because you're a self-represented party, I really can't give you any pricing kind of information. But what I can tell you is that we priced this house based on similar homes in the neighborhood. All that information is available online. I can't offer you any advice on that regard. So you basically said, look, we priced it properly, but I'm not giving you any more information on that. So then it comes down to, I want to put an offer. I'm a self-represented party. I want to put an offer on this house. Can you give me the paperwork? So again, you really can't. And so what I would say is to that person is, you should have your lawyer draft the agreement. Or what you could do I think this is kind of a workaround situation, is you could on behalf of your seller client put an offer out to, or get that, sorry, let me back up, get that seller to just put any offer together, and it'll be shit, I'm sure, and then submit it to the seller, and then you write a counter offer, which has got all the clauses, all the baked in information, that sort of thing. So that's kind of a workabout. But you, again, anytime you give any opinion, or you're asked any question, you have to think about this. Am I giving any opinions that show that I am a professional? Does that make sense? It's a really tricky one to get your head around, but basically under TRESA, registrants are prohibited from providing services, opinions, or giving advice to a self-represented party unless it directly benefits your client and does not create implied representation. I think that's the really big one, because what you don't want to do, and I always think about this, is if I get sued and I'm standing in front of the judge and the judge says, did you give that guy any information that would have implied some sort of representation? Because as soon as I say that, I'm done. So I want to be really, really careful about what I'm providing to that potential buyer. And by the way, a self-represented party could be a seller, right? That's a FSBO. So this is a little bit hard to wrap your head around. And hopefully, honestly, I think in my 32 or 33 years of real estate, I probably worked with a FSBO maybe 3 times. So it's not like, and maybe in the downtown market, you're unlikely to see it. Maybe in smaller markets, you will see it. Maybe with your postings, that sort of thing, you might see a little bit more of it. So all I would say is that if you get into that situation way beforehand, talk to your manager and just get some, perfect direction on that. So, okay. Again, some more slides about the self-represented party and some common questions, right? So if a seller client, if I have a seller client with a listing for sale and a self-represented party asks if I can provide comparables, may I do so? The answer is you can provide them with comparables. However, you cannot make a suggestion on what they should offer. I kind of believe that keep it very high level, right? And keep it kind of just loosey-goosey. Oh yeah, that house down the street sold for 1.2. That house down there sold for 900. There's a whole bunch of different comparisons. I'm going to leave it up to you to figure out what you think, but this is just the range, and we narrowed it down based on my conversations with myself. Okay, so another weird thing that's happened in TRESA is that they've really baked into this idea that, listen, if it's your house, you cannot sell it to somebody, like an agent can't represent, an agent must not represent a party to their own personal trade because of this kind of interest hearing. So really important to kind of look at that. And you don't want to have any conflict of interest. So if you're in a situation like that, just simply ask somebody in the office to deal with it. I'll skip over that one. Oops. Oops. There we go. There are some interesting kind of components of the new legislation that I think just help you be a little bit more transparent. And you'll notice this in the BRA, you'll notice this in all the paperwork that you're going to see, is that some things are much more clear. They want to know when the effective date is, when the expiry date is, what's the commission. All these things are really laid out more. And if you look at the, I'm just trying to think, if you look at the BRA, it says if this listing is longer than 6 months, please initial here. Well, now they're saying, please initial here, even if it's like 3 months, right? They just want to be really, really clear about it so that there's less confusion, I think, in the marketplace. We can get into another, David, if you want to have me back on at another time to talk about kind of what's going on with the commission cases in the States, because it's a really big thing. I think this helps kind of alleviate that. And without really talking about commissions, and all that sort of stuff. What I want to, I think, really make clear is that, we are getting into some very tricky waters in terms of what's happening with cooperating commissions, and there's a trap, and the trap is there's a trap in place which we saw during the Competition Bureau way back when on what's your commission rate. There's another trap that's going on right now. I haven't seen it, but I assume that it's going to happen, which is people will call you. You don't know who they are. They're thinking about selling their house, and they're going to say, what's the standard commission to offer a cooperating broker? As soon as they say that, you know it's a trap. And so you have to tread really carefully on that and just say, I'm going to have a conversation with you. Should we decide to market? And we're going to there's no standard commission. We're going to figure it out ourselves, what we think is going to work for us. So just that's sort of a side note, and I'm happy to come back and talk about that. Anyway, so all the paperwork that we see in TRESA is really just meant to clarify, to let the consumer know that there's all these little things that maybe were not hidden, but maybe not as clear. Tries to just solidify that, codify that, and put it into a better picture. Again, written agreements for sellers. I'll leave this one. It's a long one, and we don't really need to go into that. There are disclosures, tons and tons of disclosures now. Again, so we want to make sure that if there are, if we know that we're going to be in multiple representation, there are disclosures. If there's material facts about the property, there's going to be disclosures. If there's any conflicts of interest, there's going to be disclosures. And a lot of this stuff, excuse me, a lot of this stuff, we already have disclosures, but again, let's bring it to the front of the conversation so that there's no gray area, so that the consumer says, well, you didn't really tell me about that. Boom, here's the paper that showed that I had this conversation with you, and it's all out there, especially around multiple representation. Let's go through that. There we go. The next big piece that's kind of new to this thing is this RECO information guide, and this is a really interesting thing that the government put together, RECO put together. And I'm sure all of you have seen it, 13 pages of nonsense, but not really. I think really what it boils down to is we as realtors are really just meant to now explain to the consumer everything there is about this. And there's a link on the RECO site that allows you to send it right to the consumer. So that's great. I like the idea of putting it in a document where I can highlight pieces of it. And so the conversation would be something like this. Hey, Mr. and Mr. Buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I just want to let you know that over the last 6 months, the Ontario government, through the Real Estate Council of Ontario, has made some significant changes to how realtors and consumers interact. They put together this 13-page document, which I need you to read and acknowledge. It's not by any means does it signify that we're in a contract, but it just lays out some of the things that you should be aware of, and it just really there for consumer protection. I want to send this to you. What I've done is I've highlighted some things that I think are really, really important, and then what I do is highlight top half, maybe the quarter down, middle half, and just sort of pepper those highlights so that in order to get from one highlight to the next highlight, they're going to have to read through the other thing, because when they open up a document that's 13 pages long, they're just going to skim over it, or they're just going to not do it. And so I think it's really, really important for you as a realtor to use this as an opportunity to actually go through, to kind of not skim through it, but to explain it to them in a really logical way. And one of the things that it'll do right away is, if you're really good at it, is it going to set you apart from everybody else? And I think that's well worth it. It also talks about things like, well, what happens if I don't want to work with a realtor? And it'll tell you, well, if you don't want to work with a realtor, thanks. If you don't want to work with a realtor, then you can, you can certainly be self-represented, but here, and there's another RICO guide for that, but these are the things that you have to look out for. It also tell you that if you are going to list your house, here are some of the things here are some of the services that you should expect. Okay, so it's a great document that if you really have a good handle on, it'll set you apart from everybody else. 60,000 agents in Ontario. I can guarantee you that probably more than half don't even know that there's changes to the legislation. And then another, half of that probably have a very limited understanding of it. And when they get when they're starting to fill in documents, they're going to be like, what is this? Shit, what's this? What's this? And they're not going to have a sense. So right away, just by having a good understanding, excuse me, of the RICO information guide, you're already miles ahead. And as I said, there's an online tool that will allow you to do that. Another kind of component of the legislation, which I won't get into, is this new kind of code of ethics. And honestly, like, do I really need to tell you that that when you're dealing with a client, that you're going to have to show your integrity, honesty, and good faith? I don't need to tell you that. If you've been selling real estate for a long time, you already know that, it's not cool to have to show unprofessional conduct. I don't have to explain that to you. And, I don't want you to create frauds. Like, all these things are there. They're just sort of baked in. They touch upon them in the RICO guide. And the truth is that this is, read it under your own, on your own sort of time. But what it does do is it sets out that there are, the fines are insane. And so, what I say about kind of, the business that we're in is that, we are all self-employed. We all work for ourselves. To be really good at our business, we have to understand the legislation. We have to be really great accountants. We have to really be great marketers. We have to be great time managers. There's all these things that are part of our duty. This is just part of it. And the better, if we know all this stuff, then we're really proving ourselves to be, better agents. And again, there's stuff about the RICO discipline process, which is all there. And when I send you this, all the links are in there. Another really interesting thing that I would just, again, pass on to you is this idea that, all the links are here. So you want to read more, you want to see the RICO information guide, it's there. The tools are there. Information and disclosures are there. And again, RICO's created this information and disclosure to self-represented parties is all there. OREA forms are all here. Anything that you could want as far as a link is all here. And what I would say is, if you haven't taken, if you're, maybe your license is going to be due in the next, year, a year and a half, is take the TRESA course, because you get the credit for it. Why not? And it'll keep you right up to speed on all that. So that's kind of like a freebie, $42 or whatever, and you're going to know everything there is to know, and get your course credit as well. All the bulletins are here. They're all linked in this presentation. And then here's all the forms. Again, the new forms, the revised forms. I will tell you, this is an old slide, but all these working with a realtor forms are all gone. I actually had somebody say, I'm trying to find the working with a realtor form, and it's not there anymore. It's because, again, if you saw the early iteration of that form, it says that the client has seen the 13-page RICO guide, and there's a place for them to acknowledge that. But everything in that RICO guide is in the working with a realtor form. And so OREA just ditched the working with a realtor form. Don't need it anymore. The RICO guide is way better. Anything that had customer on it is obviously discontinued, and some other forms are discontinued as well. And that's it. I think I did a pretty good job of trying to get through that. What I will tell you is that the seller, when you're doing a listing now, in that agreement, there is a baked-in Schedule A, and on RICO, and actually have a slide which I can, when I send this, I'll include that slide in it, which lists out a number of services that you can offer to your client, which you just put in that Schedule A. I think interestingly enough, we should have a Schedule A for buyers as well. What are we going to offer to buyers? Again, it just makes us look way more professional, and I'm working on that so that we can put that in. And if I have the time, I will bake that list into this presentation as well. And I think with that, I'll just hit to the questions.
Hey, Mark.
Keely's, yeah, go ahead.
So is it my understanding that some of the provinces out west have done away with multiple rep, or is it something similar to this? And the second part of that question is, do you see, I think in the near future, do you see them, eradicating multiple rep altogether just because of the limitations to provide, top service to both sides?
I really can't see that. I mean, this in order to do that, you're gonna have to change legislation again, and we're just getting used to that. So I can't see that happening anytime in the near future. I think that was always a concern. This multiple representation type of thing was always a concern. And I think that what this does is it really kind of helps give people a sense that we're on it, that we've tried to figure it out. And I think that first part of it is the designated rep. And by the way, designated rep has been in Alberta for forever. It's been in BC forever. And so we're just kind of catching up. The legislation is kind of catching up to that. I don't see multiple representation going away anytime soon. However, I would say that our government is reactionary. So and we've seen this time and time again where they jump on something when there's enough noise about it. And the whole idea of that stupid 801 form came as a result of somebody who said no one told me how many offers there were. There was phantom offers. There were all this sort of stuff, whether or not there was or not. But then there's a reactionary legislation that kind of comes into play in new forms. So it's going to behoove us as realtors to stay above the board, to stay transparent, to stay honest, to make sure that the conversation is above board, so that no consumer says, "Wait a second, I got screwed somehow." And so that's a training mechanism, and as long as that goes well, I don't see any changes.
Cool.
I'm happy to take any questions.
I've
got a question.
Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah.
I'm not overly concerned about self-represented parties. I don't think it'll take up a lot of my time or become a large part of my business. But the one thing that is going to throw me for a loop when it happens is getting an offer from a self-represented party not on standard forms.
Yeah.
And whether or not I have an obligation to work with this offer, or if the best practice is to just give in and sign back on standard forms if they'll take it. Like, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, really interesting. So I actually I sold a property not that long ago before all the new changes. It was a commercial property, and it was drawn up on legal form on a lawyer's offer. It was 26 pages of stuff, and it was really over the top. And so have to deal with that. So listen, it's up to you, and it's up to your client, right? Like if someone sends you actually, I just saw something which was really interesting, and I couldn't open the link, but I will check into it. But there was somebody had handwritten an offer, and apparently it was not legal. So I find that really crazy, because if it's all the stuff is there, and there's a price, and there's a deposit, and there's signatures, it seems like it would be an offer, but apparently they ruled against it. So I'm going to look into it. But so what I would say is, if someone gives you an offer that's chicken scratch, or it comes from a lawyer that's all written, as long as it has all the details that make an offer, there's an offer price, there's a deposit, there's signatures, there's conditions, there's clauses, all those sort of things, I think it's fine. But what I would do and I would just have that conversation with the buyer. So we're going to, we look at your offer, we saw it. My clients feel much more confident in the process if we're going to sign it back on standard forms. That's what I would do.
Mark, if I can just jump in, I just went through this, and the
Yeah.
deal's going to close at the end of next week. And it went very smoothly, actually, for the first one. And
Nice.
what the situation was I had an exclusive listing while the property was getting prepared for market.
Yeah.
And one of the neighbors approached my seller and said, I want to buy it.
Right.
So I said to her, you know, she and I, my seller and I, discussed what price she would be willing to accept. And the buyer, the self-represented party, said to her, what price do you want? Just in conversation on the front lawn.
Right.
And so he agreed to that price. So
Okay.
he contacted me, and he sent me just a letter saying, I want to buy the property. I will pay this amount of money, and I can, you know, give you a deposit of this much, and I can close in 30 days.
Beautiful.
And so I responded to his letter with, please give me the contact information for your lawyer and let me communicate directly with your lawyer. So that's what we did. I took his letter, emailed it to his lawyer.
Yeah.
His lawyer and I and my seller agreed that I would write a seller's offer
Yep.
and send it to the lawyer. The lawyer would then do the sign back on behalf of the self-represented party. We got it accepted. We got the deposit done,
Cool.
and just confirmed with the lawyer yesterday that we're closing, no problem.
Beautiful.
So it was quite simple.
Yeah.
As long as I never said anything to the self-represented party about price or condition or deposit or anything. He had to give me that information.
Yeah. Perfect.
And so it all worked out really well. So again, like as mentioned, hopefully they don't take up a lot of our marketplace. I don't think they're gonna, you know, overwhelm and take away a lot of business from us, but
Yeah.
it can be handled relatively easily. I think the key is to, as soon as you meet that self-represented party, is to get their lawyer involved.
Yeah, 100%. And that makes a ton of sense. And so, yeah, I mean, I love it when a plan comes together. That's perfect.
I know, Mark, you were talking about potentially coming back to talk a little bit more about what's happening with the commissions, and so I don't want to go deep into that.
Yeah.
But is it safe to say it's going to hit us up in Canada just a little different, just because of the nature of how we do real estate? Like we're a lot more involved. You know, they hand it over at a certain point in the US, and there's a lot of other people involved, but we're kind of there through the whole process. And there's a lot more that we do. Do you think it will hit us a little different, or are we in the same boat?
You know, I think we're lucky in a lot of ways because, you know, it's going to take years for the dust to settle on that particular lawsuit in the States. It's going to take years. And while it's all, you know, while they're trying to figure it all out, while, you know, NAR is going to throw tons and tons of money at it in lawyer fees and stuff. But while they're doing that, they're going to still try and figure out kind of a solution. And we'll take, you know, some direction from how that's going. But again, I'll just be really critical about, you know, or I guess maybe because I'm paranoid, having lived through the Competition Bureau and actually received a call, you know, from somebody asking about what's my standard commission, and there is no standard commission. So, you know, just be kind of really mindful of that. And you know, again, I'm not able to talk to and broadcast to every single agent in Ontario that please don't say standard commission at any time. But I can only just sort of broadcast that to my, you know, close group. So, you know, I listened to a really interesting podcast about this thing. And, you know, the truth of the matter is that, you know, there's not a lot, especially in Ontario, in Canada, I believe that, you know, the Competition Bureau, you know, won their case, you know, whatever it was 5 or 6 years ago. It hasn't really changed our industry too much, I don't think. But what it did allow is for mere postings to come on and, you know, to offer $1 commissions and all this sort of thing. And so what I would say is that there was already been for a really long time an opportunity for any buyer or seller to choose the model that they want. And if they didn't, well, that's on them, right? So, so will it I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really say, but I'll just say, we're going to wait to see what happens in the States. But in the meantime, I think what we'll try and do is just sort of make it a little bit more tenable so that they'll have a less of a battle.
Right.
I just had that exact thing yesterday. I was doing a listing presentation and the lady said to me, "What's your standard commission?" And I said to her, "First of all, there is no standard commission. We are all able to charge what we feel is fair for our services."
Yeah.
And her response was, "Oh, because the other agent that was here told me that the standard in this area is 5%.
Ouch.
And I said, "I don't know who that agent is, nor do I want to know, but there is no
Right.
standard commission." And she was kind of surprised.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it's a big trap for sure. And you come out as being already well ahead of the competition just by adopting that stance. And so when it comes down to the other sort of trap is, and I don't really, it's touchy, but if someone says, "What's the commission to the buying agent?" What you don't want to say is, well, in order to attract the right a number of sellers or a number of buyers, it should be high. I think you have to be really clear about it. And for me, I'd say, look, at every buyer who comes out there is going to have a buyer's representation agreement, and that's going to have a commission thing on it. So we have to sort of bear that in mind when we make the decisions. I'll talk more about it down the road.
Mark, if you could take out your crystal ball just for a second.
Yeah.
So, with all these different companies, entities kind of coming into our space, sharing information like Purple Bricks and things like that, House Sigma. And now we've obviously, my old board, PCAR, Quinty, Kawartha Lakes, all merged with Durham. And, there's a share agreement with TREB. Do you see the future us kind of like uniting provincial board, dare I say, eventually a national board, like one MLS, or what do you think the future holds in that regard?
So there's a really interesting thing that's happening right now at the CREA level, and that is that they are contemplating making Realtor.ca a for-profit entity. And maybe 10 years ago, I went to a special AGM for CREA in Winnipeg, where this was first floated, this idea of creating a for-profit entity out of CREA, out of Realtor.ca. And at the time, it was shot down like there's no tomorrow. And I think that the reality is that it was uncharted waters. It was a terrifying kind of idea that Realtor.ca, the basic hallmark of MLS across Canada, could be somehow bastardized and turned into like ads running and all this sort of shit happening, and data being sold and all kinds of crazy stuff. Like everyone's just, their heads exploded at this idea. And the truth is that that the times have changed. We've got more portals coming in. We've got Zillow and House Sigma and all these other portals that have come in, and what they're trying to do is sort of maybe standardize the information. And so this idea of creating a for-profit notion of Realtor.ca is kind of floated to the top of the pile again, and the outcome of it is changed. People are more willing to look at that, because what they want to do is say, hey, listen, if there's guardrails to this, where we don't see ads, where we don't sell stuff, where there's other ways to make money from this, where that money is used to create a best-in-class national portal for real estate, that's probably not a bad idea. And so I don't know what that would look like. One of the questions that I get asked as I'm running for CREA is, what do you think about this? And I say, look, I think the time is probably right for this to happen, but what are the guardrails, right? Can we create a best-in-class portal for realtors? Can we put the realtor first? Every decision that's made at Realtor.ca in the for-profit thing is, okay, we want to do this. First question I'm going to ask, does it benefit the realtor, right? So this is, I think, the hallmark of Canadian real estate. So it's going to be really great for consumers. It's going to be really great for realtors, and it's going to blow Zillow away. It's going to blow all those other guys away. So that's my goal. And then in terms of like the province, I mean, it's great to see Clara coming together. There's another group over here. I was talking to Mississauga is basically, building, putting all their boards together, Hamilton, but, Oakville says, we don't want to be part of that. We want to be part of TREB. So, there's a bit of kind of division here. I don't know where the smoke is gonna clear, but it is going to come to a head. And the other thing I would say is that in Montreal, there is a for-profit component. At TREB, there's a for-profit component. So it's not like, and in Alberta, there's a for-profit component. So we're seeing more of this. In fact, I heard that in Alberta, the board will actually, or not the board, but the real estate board of Alberta actually does commission advances. And so there's lots of crazy stuff that's out there. There's nothing as constant as change in this industry.
Diane's got a question in the comments. I'll just read it to you. It says, I think Mark spoke on this, but can we get some clarification that a realtor cannot acquire property for themselves with the new TRESA rules?
You can buy a property for yourselves, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what he's referring to, Mark, is you can't do multiple rep on your own property.
That's it. That's the only thing. Yeah, you can't. So you can't multiple rep. If you're selling your property, you can't bring in your own clients.
But you could bring in an agent and get a referral.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, no problem.
And I just had one, just more of a comment, but there was a lot of good takeaways, but one that seems so obvious that you touched on, Mark, that I'm going to implement right away. And you might have been generous when you talked about how many people in province are up to date on these things.
Yeah,
I have interactions with agents all the time, and I feel like, I don't want to be that guy, but a huge percentage of people don't know how can't even explain clauses to clients. It's
terrible.
frustrating. You should see some of the offers we get. But when you talked about the just knowing the RICO form, and it's just, I found out in presentations I would stand out just by being able to take them through the 20 clauses, right? And just having an understanding of that. And you're right, it doesn't take that much time. So these new RICO documents, and when I'm explaining the 13-page document to them, right away I'm going to stand out. If they're seeing 4 or 5 different agents for the offer presentation, you're just going to, by just knowing your job, you're going to stand out, because you'd be surprised how many people don't. So I just think it's in everyone's best interest just to take the time to learn that form, so you'd understand
Absolutely.
it. Because you kind of look like an idiot. I remember early in my career, I made a mistake of I'm doing a presentation, and someone says, "Oh, what's this clause and what's this clause?" And I was like, I wasn't 100%. Then I went back to I have the book here. I went back to my RICO textbook, and I made sure I knew how to explain every single one of the 28s. And now I just kind of skate over them if they have any questions. You just want to look like you're an expert, right? You want to look like an expert.
Just so you know too, David, that in web forms, there's forms explained. So every form, there's a form explained. It's plain language in red.
I find it similar because I work in the provincial government, and you just have to do your job to look like a standout.
Yeah.
Right. And if you do a little bit more, you're a rock star. You'd be surprised how many people just don't do the basics. And I think it's true for most industries. And
for sure, the bar is set pretty low already. So you can be a rock star just by kind of explaining things. And I always did the same thing when I was dealing with any client, is you turn over the page and you see all that boiler stuff, the boiler points and boilerplate stuff. And, just picking out, highlighting 3 or 4 is already like way more than the next guy's going to do. And so, I'd pull it over and say, look, this is all boilerplate plate stuff. But what I want to do is I want to draw your attention to things that I think are going to be critical to your transaction. This, and this. And already, that it's like I've taken the time to, really point out things that are valuable to you in terms of boilerplate. So yeah, you're already ahead of the game. And same with the RICO guide. So whether or not you're sitting down and talking to them, or you're just emailing it to them, sending it to them, the point is just outline a couple of things where they, where they should really draw their focus to. And if you space them out, that to get from this one to this one, they're going to have to get through here. That's going to go a long way.
Awesome.
And again, I always look at, and everything I do, I always look at, if I'm in front of a judge, did I do my job? And if you can say, yes, I did, I crossed all my T's, I dotted all my I's, I took the time, I explained it. I was very, knowledgeable. I was transparent in all my dealings. You can't go wrong. And by the way, you should always, double up with an email just to get verification, or text or whatever, and just throw that in the file.
Yeah. I learned that government the hard way.
Yeah.
Now if it's on the phone, I like to send as per our discussion.
Yeah.
Just reiterate everything.
That's the best.
And I write everything, text, emails, like it's going to be transcribed in court.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
But
exactly.
any last questions before we let Mark get on with his day?
I have one last question.
Go ahead.
As far as open offers go, and the fact that the legislation doesn't really regulate the process of how and what we're disclosing, I feel like this is an opportunity for people to just be so corrupt, and for a listing agent to just cherry pick the best parts of all offers, and that's what they disclose. Like, is that what I'm hearing that people are going to be doing? Like, they'll cherry pick, this is the highest price, this is one's clean, one's closing in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then just disclose that as if it's one offer.
So that would not be cool. And I think that was not the intention of the rule. And so, what I would say is, if you've got, 4 offers, I wouldn't want to cherry pick and say, well, the highest price is $1 million, closing tomorrow, with a $200,000 deposit, because what you're missing out on is that there's a VTB, that there's, some other, weird thing, that there's, conditions on selling a purchaser's house. That's not the nature or the intent of this rule. Is to say, I've got 5 offers, this offer is this much, but there's a condition. This offer is this much, it closes here. It's a clean offer. And so then you're giving people really a good idea of what it is. Yeah, I think, will people cherry pick because they don't understand the rule? 100%. And that's up to you then to say, hold the phone here. I have a bad feeling, about this. Can you definitively tell me that none of these offers have conditions? Like, I'd be asking those questions, right? And I'd be saying to my client, I got a bad feeling about this.
Yeah, that's my concern, is being on the buying side of it, presenting that back to my client and, asking them to clarify, and they say, well, this is all we're disclosing at this time. It's like, okay, great.
Yeah, and I think it's really weird that there's a, a self-destruct clause, because, if I'm buying a house, I want to buy the house. Like, the fact that someone's going to talk about my offer, they're not saying who it is. They're just saying, here's the price and here's the closing date. Like, who cares? But I think there will be people who don't want to play that game, so that's fine.
Right.
You think there'll be a kind of updates to that legislation, just to alleviate what Jess was just talking about?
I feel like when people abuse it, there may be.
Yeah.
They might have to rein it in a little bit.
I think that's the thing, right? It's going to be, if agents abuse it, then it's going to change. So let's not abuse it.
I know that an FYI too, Mark and I were at a TREB meeting, and they are working on a tool that you can actually, all the offers are in it. I can't remember what is it, Realm or SkySlope or whatever, but you click transparent or traditional, the button, and it will email everybody that submitted an offer like a spreadsheet of price, closing date, conditions, etc. So everybody's going to get the exact same information.
Yeah. And then, there are platforms like Open, which came from Australia, which I think CREA is experimenting with. And there's a number of agents, even in Ontario, that are exploring it as a platform, like a digital kind of platform where all those offers come in there. So yeah, it's again, nothing is as constant as change in this industry.
Or anyone else? Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you. Really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
listen, thank you, David. It was absolutely my pleasure to speak to you about this. I think it's learning. Let's keep learning, right?
Yeah, and as you said, if it's okay, as you mentioned, I'll share the deck that has all the embedded links. Thanks for doing the legwork for us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You can just do that. And again, appreciate it again, and we'll looking forward to having you on again.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks very much. Have a
See you
great
guys.
week.
Thanks.